In this episode of the Sam Oldham Podcast, I'm joined by Kensley, the talented human being behind Neutral Deductions, a podcast, website, vlog, and social media platform dedicated to the sport of men's artistic gymnastics. Together, we're going to recap the Commonwealth Games and the recent US National Championships, where Fred Richards took the all-around title. We'll then take a look at the upcoming European Championships that take place in Zagreb in Croatia, where Great Britain will be aiming to retain their European title from 2025. Kensley, it's a pleasure to have you with us again. I know that we've done this on so many occasions now that I forgot how many times we've done this. I'm really excited to focus on some gymnastics after 2 weeks away in Crete on a honeymoon. Hopefully I'll have lots of energy and we can talk all things men's gymnastics. So thank you for joining us. I was pleased to find out that you were there in Phoenix. Me and Sam were absolutely gobsmacked to hear that it was 44 degrees Celsius, which doesn't even sound real, to be honest. And we were just saying that everybody in the UK is freaking out because it's 36 degrees here tomorrow. But yeah, that's wild. I wonder how that maybe affected or impacted the gymnastics that was done. I guess being a sport that's done inside, not too much, but we'll hear about that. And like I said, we'll start with the Commonwealth Games, then the US Nationals, and then the European Championships. But first of all, Kensley, how are you?
I'm so well. I'm glad to be back where it's a little bit cooler in Colorado. It's so funny when we were talking about, I was trying to explain how hot Phoenix was. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was 112 degrees one day. And they were like, that means nothing. And I'm like, really? Because something over 100 feels like so much more impressive than saying 44 degrees Celsius. But yes, it was very, very hot there. We did drink lots of electrolytes. And but I'm glad to be back here in the Neutral Deductions studio and talk about men's gymnastics.
Yeah, and you've been doing a great job, Kensley, recently. I mean, as somebody that is a fan of the sport of men's artistic gymnastics, from afar I'm looking and I'm seeing all of your numbers going up and the engagement and the comments, and it's something that it just makes me smile because I know how great you are at what you do, but it's great that people are taking such an interest, and I think yeah, hopefully that bodes well for the next 2 years. I imagine, that is only going to grow as we head towards LA. So thank you for all of the great work that you do. I know that a lot of people over here in the UK, you are the go-to when it comes to statistics, and even the speed at which you are now trying to turn things around is amazing. When I was a kid, we never had anything like that in the sport of gymnastics. So I really appreciate that, and I know I'm not on my own. So thank you for that. Let's start with the Commonwealth Games, Kensley, and I know a lot has already happened since then in the sport, and there's been big competitions since the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, but I think it's probably important for my audience in particular that maybe follow the show here in the UK to just recap that, because we did a preview episode. I did manage to watch most of the events at the Commonwealth Games, albeit it was around the busiest time of my year. The end of July is when schools break up, so I was just absolutely jam-packed, and they did make it hard by not having it on the BBC this time, so it was on TNT Sports, so it's behind a paywall. So it was really sad, actually. That's the first time that's ever been the case in my lifetime, and really sad for that next generation that maybe could have had an opportunity to watch some of their heroes over here, whether that be in England, Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland, compete on the TV screen. We don't have that many opportunities with our sport of gymnastics to get to watch it on the big screen, so that was a real shame. But I did watch the competitions. I think my initial takeaway was that given that the English team was not going to be the A team, I knew that maybe the level would seem slightly lower, but I did almost feel like there was a big gap between what I'd expect to see from the teams that will be there at the European Championships and then the World Championships, just in terms of the difficulty and just those overall. I think it didn't help that maybe some of the top athletes didn't perform very well, so I expected a bit more from Australia. I think I was expecting a lot from Jesse Moore and maybe that Australian team, and maybe they could ride the coattails of his performances that he's produced so far this cycle and at the back end of last cycle. And I think with that 2032 Olympic Games that's going to be in Australia, I was maybe expecting a little bit more, but maybe it's just a bit too soon for those performances maybe to translate on the big stage at the moment. And I think obviously Canada for me were probably the team that were the most improved, and in the past, particularly the last Commonwealth Games and maybe the last two Olympic cycles, I think They've been relatively strong, but have always been held back by poor performances, maybe on pommel horse and maybe a lack of experience at times. Whereas this time they seemed very professional. That's probably going to be the team we're going to see at the World Championships for Canada. And their performance, I think, is a team that's probably got a real shot at being within that top 8 and improving over the next couple of years. I think the England team did pretty well considering the circumstances. There was a lot of chopping and changing, the gymnasts being pulled out all of the time throughout the whole of that process. I mean, I didn't find out that Max was going to be pulling out until very late on, and actually he'd had that conversation with somebody at my wedding to say that he's broken his hand and he wasn't going to be doing the Commonwealth Games. You know, I completely thought that he would be competing at the Commonwealth Games while he was at my wedding. I mean, I mentioned it to him briefly. So, I mean, there was so much chopping and change with that English team. I think there were some great performances from them, but I just think overall the level just seemed a little bit lower than maybe it did in 2022. What were your thoughts on the Commonwealth Games, Kensley?
The 2022 team that was sent to the Commonwealth Games, right, was outstanding. I think there was no doubt in anyone's mind that they were going to just blow everyone away because that was the same team that ended up being sent to Euros and then being sent to the World Championships. But as you and I have talked about independently, British Gymnastics in tandem with I guess English Gymnastics decided, okay, let's not burn out our athletes and let's send separate teams to the Commonwealth Games and to the Euros team. So I actually ran all of the numbers like I usually do ahead of time, and the results did not shock me. I had predicted that the Canadian team was going to win, and actually the numbers had showed that the Australian team would come second and the English team would come third, but I had actually flipped that order because the Australian numbers, they're just inflated. And I know people, you know, they don't like that I criticize the judging so much, but the truth of the matter is if you've just followed Australian gymnastics over the past several years, the numbers that they get domestically are honestly in the all around kind of like several points inflated to what they get internationally. And so I kind of adjusted those scores. And so I had predicted it would be Canada, England, Australia, and that's exactly what it was. You know, I think the Canadian team, they had some falls. You mentioned that you think it would be the same team that's going to be at the World Championships. I think that there could be a switch. So Sam Zakutny was not there because right. He had gotten married. So I think that they'll probably swap, assuming he's still training, would swap him out for Ethan. But I do think that that's a fairly solid team that you have there and that we will see them at the World Championships. I think the English team has to be commended for coming back from Gabriel's fall, right? We have to talk about that moment that went viral. And that's been a really interesting thing for me to look at from a media perspective of, you know, men's gymnastics typically does not get a whole lot of attention. And this one pretty horrific moment went completely viral, and people who'd never followed gymnastics were sending this to me, and maybe the same happened for you. And it sort of got me thinking about why is this the moment and the pinnacle of our sport that is getting the most attention?
And what were your takeaways from that? I mean, that's probably the human element of that Commonwealth Games, like the standout moment probably will be from the gymnastics, just how dangerous that was. I think maybe what it was that did really highlight just how dangerous the sport is and can be and what could happen. And he was incredibly lucky to walk away really without any injuries from that fall. It's not completely uncommon to do that when you do a squat half or attack half, as you would call it in the US, particularly if you're learning it. You've got a bit of adrenaline, you shoot that out really quick, and what can happen is when you go to push with the two arms, you just lose your sensation of holding the bar, your hands come off, and then once you're upside down there's literally nothing you can do other than tuck your head in to get out of the way. That skill is very similar to, it's different, but the second half of that skill is virtually exactly the same as a stutz when you land. And if you were to miss your hands on a stutz, you'd do exactly the same thing on parallel bars. You'd basically spike straight on your head. I just think it really highlighted, wow, this is actually a steel bar, 2.8 meters in the air. And if you fall down on that onto your head, this could literally be a life-threatening injury. So I think it was that moment really stood out. And you're right. I was actually, at the time of watching the team final, putting Aussie to sleep as that happened, and all of my old teammates that were there working in broadcasting or watching were saying, "Oh my gosh, that was awful," and I was going, "Who is it?" Because I'm putting Aussie to bed, and I know that when I go back down and I unpause the TV, I'm going to get the fright of my life, and nobody told me, so I got it fresh. So it was it was pretty scary, but I'm so glad that you walked away, like you said, and I think it just highlighted that, just how dangerous the sport is. It reminded me somewhat of Samir Eight Saeed's leg injury at the Olympics. That was 2016. So if that had probably happened in 2026, that would have gone more viral around the world, that injury probably in that video and that clip, than it did at the time, given the fast-paced world that we live in now. But what did that really say to you, I think, about the sport, the potential to go viral, and why the actual amazing gymnastics doesn't go viral more often? It's actually the falls. It's maybe something to do with human nature, right?
I think that the fall is something that's understandable immediately to any person. Like, we've all fallen at some point in our life, right? But this is an extreme sport. And I think that there is something that you talked about in the human nature of we want like that hero story, that redemption story. And so like there is this opportunity for when there's this horrific fall, well, like, is he going to come back? Is he ever going to be able to walk? And it gives almost this moment of adrenaline and a story to latch on to and to follow. And so I think that's certainly part of it. But I also think some people just like the brute and the gore of it, right? I mean, that's right. That's why people like watching boxing and other sports where people are getting their like face smashed to smithereens. And so I'm not sure exactly what the motivation was for it going viral, but it is something that struck me personally as like, this is one of the most viral moments our sport has ever seen. And it's one of the most horrific moments that I've, watched live.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think, it speaks to human nature a little bit, but it's also, I think, just that element of jeopardy and almost realizing as a fan or somebody watching the sport, whoa, this is so dangerous, this could happen. It makes it more exciting to continue watching. And I think it just hits home, like I said, just how dangerous the sport is. I do feel that more consistently now, I'm seeing clips of people outside the sport of gymnastics talking about just how fundamentally important the sport is for kids, which is one thing I've noticed a lot recently. People are sending me podcast clips of other podcasts, big podcasts, where people are talking about, I'm going to put my kid into gymnastics because fundamentally I think it's a great base sport for them to start with. And I am seeing that, I'm seeing that all of the time. I think that's a lag of the introduction of things like CrossFit and High Rocks and all of those kind of sports, and the adults starting to try to do the gymnastics elements of those sports, figuring out how difficult they are, and that now translating to them wanting to get their kids into that. I think that's what we're seeing the back end of. I think you probably had those adults that tried it 5 to 10 years ago for the first time, and their kids are now growing up and are 5, 6, 7, and they're putting them into the sport of gymnastics, which is really cool for us and the sport that we do. But I've noticed that, and that's something that's kind of piqued my interest a little bit. I'm like, there's so many people now, or I'm just coming across podcasts where people are talking about the sport in a really positive way, which is brilliant. It's great for us, We need to, as a sport, look at that and go, how do we harness that to generate more participation and get more people watching the sport and engage with the sport? Because I think it is there, and even that the potential for going viral in our sport is huge. How do we harness that too in the traditional format? And I think that's something that if the world of gymnastics were really smart, they'd be trying to figure out, because that would give us a great, springboard to build these athletes up in the future and keep the sport alive in the 2020s now. What did you think? What were the standout performances for you there from the Commonwealth Games when you think about it, Kensley? I think Luke's performance on floor was very professional, picked up another gold medal. Again, just a great opportunity for him to be competing, building his name, his brand as we head towards the second part of this cycle. think the big one, and the person that's really kind of put their name out there would probably be Reuben. First Scottish all-around champion. Really, on paper, it should have been Félix or Jesse to take that title, so he's done a great job there, beating both of them to that gold medal. What were your big takeaways?
I think that the two people that stand out the most to me, if I have to narrow it down for time's sake, would be Reuben Ward of Scotland and Félix Dolci of Canada. And for Reuben, it's interesting. I see almost this parallel to 2024. I think it was the European Championships when Max Whitlock pulled out and then Luke got to go in. And Luke was sort of able to make this name for himself, to put himself in contention for that Olympic team. Whereas before that happened, no one really had Luke in contention for that British Olympic team. And I know that, Max would have been competing for England and Reuben would have been competing for Scotland. So it's not a perfect parallel, but it's just interesting that in the same competition that Max has pulled out, like Reuben has sort of made this name for himself. And the multiple hits of pommel horse performance has almost made me say, like, I think that spot on the British team at Worlds is really Reuben's to lose. Actually, I don't think it's Max's to lose at this point. And so that was a highlight for me. And you're right. I think had Félix and Jesse had a little bit better performances, I think, right, they had more difficulty. They had a higher ceiling, but Reuben was able to capitalize in front of the home crowd and, became the first Scottish man to win that Commonwealth all-around title. And he'll go down in the history books for that. But, you have to talk about Félix. Félix fell on pommel horse and he had this huge comeback coming back from, I think he was in 17th at one point, and to make it all the way back up to second place. And then he ended up taking not only a medal there, but he took still rings gold and he took vault gold and he took high bar gold. And it just felt like the Félix Dolci Games, to be completely honest.
Yeah, it's hard. I think, we've sat down and we had a conversation with Félix, and I think straight away me and Sam were like, this guy is something a little bit special. The way he talks, just how professional he is in the way that he approaches gymnastics, but also the way he looks at his brand and building that brand and that following and the business side of the sport. He's certainly operating on a different level. I think the one thing that he just reminds me of is Fabian in a lot of ways. It's just pommels is always going to be an issue. And I know that, and having had that conversation with him on the podcast and understanding a little bit about his mindset and how he thinks about the sport, I know that for him, the all-around will be huge. That will be a massive target. So I'm sure he will have left Glasgow being disappointed in himself. Not that he needs to be, but because I imagine that he is almost a traditionalist in the sense that he probably places a high amount of importance on that all-around competition. And he will have been disappointed that he'd had that mistake there on pommels and was in the position to have to fight back. Really, he should have been, he would have expected himself or wanted himself to be in a position of, going into a high bar routine, and all he needed to do was stay on and win that gold medal. So, yeah, I do wonder what he does now in between the World Championships and even in between LA, given that this is probably going to be his big peak Olympic Games, and he'll have aspirations of finishing in a top 8 all around, I'm sure, in LA. I just wonder what he does strategically when he thinks about his pommel horse, right? Most athletes have that one apparatus that is a bit of a problem for them, and it's tough. And maybe actually it's a good idea that he speaks to somebody like Fabian or someone that, he can almost kind of familiarise himself with or compare himself to in terms of strengths and weaknesses. He's very similar. Like, if you think about, his spatial awareness is unbelievable. Really good on vault, high bar, parallel bars, floor, pretty strong on rings. And then pommels is just that Achilles heel for him. So I think, the great thing is that Canada have improved so much on pommels. Maybe just being around those guys will hopefully pay off. A bit of that, he'll get that rub and that snowball effect maybe. But I think what it comes down to is really clever construction and strategy when it comes to that apparatus, to give himself a routine that can put him in contention of finishing within the top 8 all around. Because I think he's got the capacity to do that. Pommels is just such a difficult apparatus, isn't it? But I don't want to take anything away from Félix. I'm a massive fan of him and his gymnastics, and the fact that he picked it up, finished in second, led that Canadian team in many ways, and also won the gold medals that he did in the apparatus finals, it's incredible. It's just me as a fan of the sport of gymnastics going, okay, what's this guy's potential? I think he could be right up there. What does he need to do to be right up there with those top all-arounders in the world and be within that top 8 come LA? But I think you're right. I would agree. I think Félix, just purely from the human element of that comeback and the quality of his gymnastics on those other 5, it's just so good, like world class. But like I said, I think Luke putting out his Dragulescu again is going to be big for him when it comes to team selection, and being able to produce another floor routine. Just helps his cause no end, but Reuben for me was the real standout performer of that competition. The interesting thing about Reuben was, with all of the drama and the changing of places with injuries and selection and everything that was going on behind the scenes, which was, very dramatic because I was hearing what was going on behind the scenes. Reuben was interesting because he was Scottish. It kind of helped BG, British Gymnastics, in that they could get away with, well, he can compete over there at the Commonwealth Games, and that's his priority because he's Scottish and he doesn't really come into the mix with the Europeans. We can kind of have him over here doing this for Scotland, and that doesn't impact this selection that's going on too much. And then he can kind of come back for Worlds if he does a good job. So I think it kind of worked out quite well in the selection's favour there. If Reuben was English, that would have been more complicated, I think. But because he was Scottish, he was just kind of separate to what was going on with the drama with England, GB, and that kind of selection that was going on there. So I saw that you've kind of predicted that Worlds team there for GB, and I agree that Reuben kind of fits there because his other apparatus are so strong, bar and his parallel bars. But yeah, they were kind of my big takeaways from the Commonwealth Games, really, Kensley.
Yeah, as soon as the US team was named, I immediately went and predicted the British team, because which maybe this is a good transition into nationals, the US nationals, but people on the Gymternet, because the U.S. is currently missing 3 of their big hitters. They're missing, world champion Donna Wittenberg, world champion Brody Malone, and then Olympic medalist Asher Hong. And so people are like, oh my God, are they even going to make team finals? And I'm like, people are so out of touch. Like, yes, it's a little bit of a depleted team, but it's still a very competitive team. And so, of course, I want to know how competitive they are, because there's always kind of this baseline assumption of like, okay, China and Japan are looking at that 1-2 spot, and then probably Russia, Great Britain, USA, and maybe one of the other teams at European Championships will stand out as well. But those 3 are typically kind of in that mix for bronze. And so I predicted who I think is going to be on the British team and ran the numbers. And it's actually the US team and the British team are very, very close. And so yeah, that's why I was running those numbers.
Yeah. And we'll move on to the US nationals, and finish up by saying, great job to everybody at the Commonwealth Games. I thought actually the athletes did a really good job of making it entertaining, the competition and the performances. Yeah. The Scottish team were great to watch. My heart was kind of with them. I was wanting them to get a medal, kind of, because I've got such a close relationship with a lot of the guys on that team, Pavel and Hamish. I was kind of like willing them to do it, and I was so excited. I think in the end they just didn't quite have the firepower on the day to pull it off, but they did a great job. And I think the people that did watch and had paid to watch the competition will have really enjoyed it. And like I said, it's not a knock, I think, on the quality of the overall competition. It was just that the team for Birmingham was so strong, that English team. I think it just made the overall competition seem like the level was just a little bit higher. And maybe what we're seeing there is a transition from one generation into the next generation a little bit. And it will be interesting to see how that shapes up in 4 years' time. Given that will then be 2 years out from the Olympic Games in Australia, and we'll see maybe how the Australians fare in 4 years. And my expectations are that they'll continue to improve and get better as we build up towards that Olympic Games in 2032. But yeah, congratulations to everybody there, and a special mention, like we said, to Félix, Reuben, Luke, some really great performances, and everybody there. I mean, Adam Tobin, somebody that I think's done a great job this year, has been incredibly consistent, an athlete that probably could have walked away from the sport at times over the last couple of years, and he's dug in deep and done really, really well. And he's somebody that's so well balanced across all 6 apparatus, that somebody like that is so useful for a team and a squad, that he can certainly, if he can just keep himself fit and healthy over the next 2 years, you never really know what's going to happen in a selection. I think the interesting thing with Alex Cash is that, he's so well known for his pommel horse, given the great year that he had last year and finishing 5th at the Worlds, but actually his best performances have been on parallel bars and high bar, and maybe actually that's going to really help him, because once he figures out the missing link on pommel horse again that he struggled with this year, the athlete that does go to the Olympic Games, to be honest, for the US team and the British team, with their strength being pommel horse, is probably, I think, going to have to be able to do other apparatus. So the stronger you are on the other apparatus, the better. And that's something I'll talk to you a little bit about when it comes to the US as we move on to that now, Kensley. But let's start maybe with the all-around, the top 3 guys who I felt kind of stood out in and amongst themselves. I did manage to watch the whole of day 2. I watched the top routines from day 1, but you were there in the arena, in the stadium. What were your expectations going in, and then what were your reflections after day 1 as we headed into day 2, Kensley, when it comes to those top all-rounders?
Yeah, I thought the top 3 coming in would be Fred, Shane, and Yule. I did not expect Danila Leykin, who is a newcomer. He was on the junior world team, to be in that all-around conversation. And coming out of day 1 of competition, Danila Leykin was in 2nd place by only 0.2 to Fred Richard. And actually, if you had taken away the U.S. domestic bonus system scoring, he actually was in the lead for day 1 of competition, which blew me away. I mean, everyone knows he's great on high bar, but he has this huge weakness on rings, and I just didn't think he would be in that conversation. And wow, that was the big moment for me. That was the big takeaway, was like, wow, this kid is the real deal.
Yeah, I think I had the same thing. When I saw how tight the scores were, I was like, whoa, I'm very impressed with that. And straight away I wanted to watch his routines. And I would probably, going into the competition, would have had a similar thought process in that his rings would just be a bit too weak for him to be competitive. But actually, I think what you're seeing there in real time is what I've been predicting would happen throughout this cycle, is that as the juniors begin to transition into the seniors, needing only to do 8 skills, they are going to transition a lot faster and a lot quicker and be competitive with the senior athletes a lot quicker. And actually, when I zoom out and look at this across a longer time scale, my prediction is that rather than the average age of gymnasts going up in the top countries, I think the average age is going to start to come back down again. And I think you're going to see younger teams. I think we saw that a lot kind of pre-2012 time, with a lot of the best junior athletes at a junior Euros would transition straight into the senior team because they were already doing 10 skills. And when that changed to juniors just doing 8 skills, then the jump to seniors was so big, it was taking those athletes 2 or 3 years to acclimatize to now having to do effectively an extra 20% worth of training volume, competition routine, skill volume in a competition environment. And I think that's going to reverse. I think what we're going to see is the average age of a team start to get lower again, not get older. That might be an unintended consequence of the decision to drop to 8 skills. And we're always talking about how great it is that athletes can continue their careers for longer. But I'm almost foreseeing and foreshadowing that will actually be reversed again. So I think you're seeing that with Danila. I think you're seeing that with a lot of the young Chinese gymnasts that competed at the Worlds last year, the young Japanese gymnasts moving in, and even the young British gymnast, Arseny Dukno, the junior world champion last year, straight in as a top all-arounder in the men's senior Russian team. You're going to see, I think, some of the juniors from Great Britain after this European Championships that are taking place in Croatia move very quickly into the senior program. So it's very interesting. A lot of moving, a lot of adjustments, but Danila really impressed me. What a unique style of gymnastics that he's got. I mean, he's really got that Soviet Union base style of gymnastics. I mean, you can see it from a mile away, which is really interesting. It's cool to see. just the lines and the technique and just his overall grasp, I think, on the sport is really, really cool. His energy, I think, is probably the most exciting thing. He looks to me like somebody that really could become a big name and a big star. We need those stars, in that way. It kind of reminds me a bit of Fabian in that way. And Fred also the same.
Just such an endearing athlete. I have not spent a lot of time around him at all. And so listening to the broadcast, I talked about on my podcast, he came off of day one on rings and was just like laughing. It was like, I hit my head on the rings again or on the straps again. And I just thought that was so funny that such a young athlete could just like slough it off and be like, whatever, like, let's make fun of this moment. And on day 2 of competition, the scoring system went down and, people were having to wait 15 minutes for the internet and the scoring system to come back up. And he's just down there with the rest of the Evo guys having this massive dance party. And just the personality seems like someone that you want to like. And so I think should his results come with maybe what people are expecting his results to be in the near future, I think that he will be a name that the general public will know.
And I think he's in the perfect place and environment to do that because he has somebody like Sam Mikulak in that gym that has walked that path and maybe is coaching from his experiences as an athlete in the reverse of the way he maybe approached the sport when he was the same age. And that's why it's so important to try and keep the athletes and the gymnasts in the sport and try and, put in place mechanisms to encourage them to become coaches because they're the best people to learn from. And I think he's feeding off that culture and learning. Maybe he's getting a lot of his technical coaching from his own coach, but maybe he's learning a lot of the how to be an athlete and interact and how not to be overwhelmed by the pressure and the expectations from the other athletes that have been there before him. So, I mean, he's in the perfect place, right? And I think with Danila, all it comes down to is probably, number one, managing his health now as he kind of grows and develops because he's still very young, but also just managing him and his ability to handle maybe the spotlight that gets put on him, and I think he's in the best place to do that. So what an exciting person to have in the sport. What were your takeaways then from Fred from day one, Kensley? Just again, I mean, it's almost like because he does cause some friction in the fact that he wants to wear his own kit and he's quite happy to take the neutral deduction that comes with that, and he pushes against the grain. You can imagine that there are certain people within the system that are kind of not necessarily going to be too disappointed if he doesn't but he just goes and he just hits. He just loves it. I think he loves the friction and the controversy. I think he just thrives on that. I think he probably needs that a little bit and he enjoys it. And I think he just does such a good job of performing because he puts the pressure on himself by doing things like that. And I thought he looked really professional again. Incredible save on pommel horse. I can see, me and you had that conversation earlier in the year about which direction he was going to go on vault. That's pretty evident now that he's pushing the Dragulescu, which I think is probably the best move for him. Most of the top all-rounders are going to be doing that, right? Most of the top vaulters are now doing Dragulescu as like their second vault, their kind of safe vault. So that's exciting because that increases his potential in the all-around. What did you think to Fred?
Yeah, Fred is such a unique individual and probably the athlete who has received the most probably like negative comments of any male gymnast I've ever been around, but also the most positive. Like he really is kind of divisive, and it does not ever come across the media that it affects him, which is remarkable because some of the other athletes that you'll talk to, like they get like one negative comment and it will just like kind of send them down the spiral. And Fred just takes like everything in turn in a way I have never seen with an athlete. He really seems to kind of embody that, like there's no bad press, like the negative attention, like it's attention, and he just seems to run with it. And I think some of the things that really stood out for me are, one, how good his floor routine was here. We have seen him make international floor finals before, but it's not an event that I think a lot of people always associate with him. I think they more associate high bar with him. And his day one high bar didn't go perfectly, but he came back the second day and he almost broke that 9-0 execution mark. A couple of the things that stood out for me weren't even his gymnastics. It was, day one, he did his pommel horse, his hand slips off the pommel horse in the middle of his Russian series. And so I think he was probably a little bit disoriented. He comes off the pommel horse, he salutes, but he salutes towards the pommel horse, not towards the D1 judge. He gets this neutral deduction. And so talking to him in the press zone, we're like, what are you going to do day two? Are you going to, make a mockery of it? I really wanted him to do the Simone Biles, like the hands up after floor and like walk off for 3 minutes with his hands up. He was like, no, I don't think I'm going to go that direction. So instead, on day two, he comes off a pommel horse and he yells to the camera, I saluted. And I'm like, that is something that kids are going to remember, right? It's not just your gymnastics. It's this moment in this presentation. I like that Fred is willing to take the deductions that are needed to move his gymnastics forward, right? He's taking this massive hop on vault and he's like, it's what I need right now in this moment to be able to move through the power to get the Dragulescu. And I think for so many of the top athletes, they want to show this like perfect presentation and they get stuck in being able to move their gymnastics forward. And Fred seems to understand that can't happen. Like his ultimate goal, he's on LA. He's on yes, he's already told the world he wants to win a gold medal this year in the all around, but his ultimate goal is LA. And he's like, to do that, these are the steps I have to take. And I'm willing to not look my best so that I can get to my ultimate goal.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I can see exactly what he's doing. I can see the small details and the nuances that people may not see at first glance. Even the fact that he has squeezed his knees together on his parallel bars, double front dismount, all of those small details, I watch and I see somebody that, exactly what you just said, his mind is on, I want to be the all-around champion. I'm playing a different game to everybody else. So this is what I need to do for right now. And I'm going to do everything I can to still win along that road. But my priority is this over here in 2 years' time. Even his double front and vault, his legs are tight. His legs are close together. So, he's doing that before he's even got to put the half twist in. Most people do a Dragulescu and then try and clean it up. I had some... not concerns, but I didn't like the construction of some of his routines earlier in the year, and he was playing around with it. His side tumble on floor was strange with just the 2.5 to landing, and I think he was trying to find the best way and the best route. I think his gymnastics overall just looked, it flowed more, the routine and the construction. It seemed more natural, it had more like rhythm to it, because I could see in his routines earlier in the year him still trying to, the cogs turning of what is the best route for me to get the highest start value here and get the best execution, and all of the time he's just making these small adjustments and improvements gradually, and you're right, he isn't concerned really about what anybody else is doing or worried about taking the risk to get himself where he needs to be. And if you want to compete with those two Japanese guys and the Chinese gymnasts, you're going to have to do that. And, whether that be the British guys, whether that be Joe or Jake or anybody else that maybe comes through, or the Russian team, you're going to have to be, unfortunately now, you almost have to be capable of apparatus finals on 3 or 4 events if you want to be one of the top all-arounders. And I believe we're going to see more and more all-rounders in the apparatus finals and less specialists. I think that's going to happen. I think we're already seeing that a little bit, because that reduction to 8 skills just means that all-rounders are now way more competitive. Because in the past, they just didn't have the time spread across 6 apparatus to have those last 2 skills in a routine, but they probably had 8. Now they're brought so much closer to those specialists. I think you're going to see that from a lot of those all-rounders, see them in all-around finals, like we did back in the day, before you would see Fabian or Hiroyuki Tomita or even Uchimura when he first came around, he would be in 3, 4 finals all of the time. So I think that's something we're going to see. And again, props to Fred for just doing it again and just doing enough to win and still progress his gymnastics with the view of LA in mind, grow the sport. His reaction, like you said, to that was spot on. I think not to kind of make it in a jokey way, but also he's not making enemies with any. You know what I mean? Like,
No.
you have to treat the judges with respect. Like, you have to be very careful the way you go about navigating that. And I think,
Well,
yeah.
and truthfully, right, there have been problems in the past where I can think about on the women's side where the domestic judges have given the benefit of the doubt to the athlete where they probably shouldn't have. And it ended up costing people when they went to the Olympic Games because they didn't get the appropriate feedback that they needed. I'm thinking specifically of Jordan Weber in her beam construction in 2012. And so I think having domestic judges, like the head judge on pommel horse, Sho Nakamori, is, in my opinion, one of the best judges in the world, just hands down. Like, he is not going to give way. And he was judging with Tim Michaels, and another judge I really respect. And, you know, other judges may have been like, we understand that he saluted, it's fine. But they were, I'm going to use the word brave enough, but like really they were just following the code to take that deduction where they realized it could have cost him. You know, if you look at the scores without bonus, Shane Wiskus actually won the all around by 0.3 exactly. So had this been a competition without bonus, that one decision could have cost Fred the all around title potentially, or had him share that with Shane. And so to be able to have judges who are saying, no, this is not how it's done, Fred will never make that mistake again. I guarantee it, right? And then you think about like Shane's high bar routine, where the start of his high bar routine, he was given the too many swings before the start of his routine. And there are judges online who are arguing about this, saying like, well, I wouldn't have given this deduction. Like, I don't think that first movement had momentum and, you know, yada, yada. I guarantee you, Shane will not do that again at a major, he will not do that at a major competition because that is in his mind to know, hey, they're watching for this. And so yes, it sucks in the moment, but I think ultimately for the benefit of the athlete in the long run.
Yeah. And also, to be honest, just for his, I think his psyche, it's just good to every now and then, if you are a superstar, to just get a little bit of a humbling in a bit of a way, you know, like a reminder that, you know, and that might be the universe just giving you that a little bit because, you know, when everybody is telling you you are the best thing since sliced bread and then you are continuously winning, it's quite easy to fall into a little bit of arrogance. So it's good that, you know, every now and then, oh yeah, actually, yeah, I do need to, I'm the same as everybody else, and you follow the rule and you kind of do that, the rule set. And yeah, I like that. So yeah, I agree. Let's talk about Shane then, because Shane is somebody that could have quite easily, a bit in the way I spoke about Adam Tobin, both equally very balanced all-around gymnasts, really strong on 6 apparatus. Shane obviously at a different level there, but could have walked away again from the sport quite easily, stayed in it, relocated, moved, changed things around. It's maybe taken 2 years, but you're seeing the evidence of that work. I think being around Sam Mikulak again, Syke, and all of the guys there at Evo must help. But Shane is so well balanced as an all-rounder, and I said this to him when he was on the podcast. You know, like I think after the podcast with Shane, I said to Sam, all this guy needs is just like a little bit of man managing and a bit of strategy and preparation maybe, and he could quite easily be so competitive because he doesn't have a weak spot. And like you said, you take away the bonus and he kind of wins the competition. I mean, I also imagine he's the type of athlete that like just needs like a little bit of a confidence booster, and this is going to give him so much to that he'll go back to the gym now and I can guarantee that whether it's potentially not now before the Worlds, but after that Worlds, if he comes out of the World Championships healthy, over the winter he will be flying and he'll be putting skills in left, right and centre because he has such a great foundational technique across the board. It's going to be so easy for him now with a little bit of a confidence to really take his gymnastics to another level, and he could be right there in and amongst, you know, Fred, and then pushing Danila because they train in the same gym, right? So he can be the standard that Danila can chase, so they can kind of bounce off each other. So yeah, really, really cool to see that. I mean, I thought Shane looked absolutely brilliant. I thought it looked really, really good. I've enjoyed following his YouTube videos. I hope he continues to do them, maybe uploads them a little bit more regularly. That gives us a good insight into Evo and the dynamics of Evo, being able to watch those training videos. But yeah, his gymnastics just, really did look world class to me.
I agree. I mean, you mentioned this, and he really is an extremely balanced all-arounder. There isn't like a huge weakness really anywhere. I think, he talked about in post-meet interviews that he came off rings and his shoulder was really hurting. And he said he had to, go back to the gym, have Steve, the trainer at USAG, who also works at Evo or works with the Evo crew, work on it. And he said, I think that it was the parallel bars routine was the most painful routine he's ever done in his life. So it's something I'm watching. I'm hopeful that there is nothing seriously wrong with his shoulder, but I think it is important to mention that he did come out of the meet and talk about that in interviews. In terms of his little biography things that he's doing on YouTube, those videos, one kind of cool behind the scenes is that his longtime coach, Kostya, his son, Nikolai, is the one who's producing those videos for him. So it's someone that Shane has grown up with. And Nikolai was a gymnast at University of Oklahoma, so he understands the sport really well. But he does this multimedia in his regular work. And so he's this friend that he grew up with his entire life is actually who's producing it.
Oh, wow, that's really cool. Yeah, no, Nikolai has actually spoke to me, reached out to me. I know he does some work with you, Kensley, and he's great what he does as well. So, it's very similar to the relationship that me and Sam have going on. Maybe back when we were doing this in the gym. I think the only thing I'd say to Shane is to keep going. So easy sometimes to go, oh, maybe now I should just focus on the gymnastics and not document the journey. But now I'm like, oh, I should have never stopped. Just always keep going. Because it's. If nothing else, it's just like a visual memory book that you can look back on, and you will one day be able to show the future generations. So, there's any young athletes out there looking for gymnastics content, go follow Shane's YouTube channel because it's really, really good. And he documents learning skills there. So that's one thing that's really helpful for a lot of the young gymnasts is seeing the progressions towards a skill. A lot of gymnasts will put on their very best work, so you just see the end product. But what's actually really helpful is seeing the beginning of that learning process of a skill. So it's really, and Shane does that, particularly with long swing Diamondov. I really enjoyed watching him learn that skill and start to build that up. But I thought Shane looked absolutely brilliant. Probably something there to monitor in terms of just his age, where he's at in his career, and his shoulder. I imagine, again, that just becomes about management of his health over the next couple of years, and maybe being strict with taking downtime or holiday time or time off. But again, there are so many clever brains in that gym there. They'll be able to best advise him, and I'm sure that they'll figure that out and get that right. But at the minute, he was a lock basically for the team, right? And you maybe wouldn't have guessed that 2 years ago, so or at least 18 months ago. So pretty amazing, those three. What about some of the others that were just outside there in the all around? Obviously, you've got Yule, you've got Josh Carnes. Is it Kim Cooper or Cooper Kim? Which way round?
Cooper Kim.
Cooper Kim.
Cooper Kim.
Who's super exciting, right? And his style of gymnastics, another personality that's bringing quite a lot of attention to men's gymnastics, and maybe is going to be able to bring over some of the fans from the women's side of the sport to the men's side of the sport because he engages with it so much. You see him doing videos of his beam work, and his artistry is just so good, right? I think that was a performance that really stood out for me. I was very impressed, particularly with his high bar, right? Like his high bar, the improvement he's made on high bar in a pretty short space time is pretty unbelievable. So,
I think he's added almost a point in difficulty
it's wild.
In a year. He is so enjoyable to watch on social, delightful. And again, I talked about this on social media, but just there are so many things that are endearing that make you want to follow his journey. And I will never get over and stop laughing about him being like, I just don't understand why people don't kick out of their double pike on floor. And, athletes lining up being like, if we could, we would, sort of thing. But the artistry and the flair on floor and, the height that he gets on his dive roll, it's a simple skill, but it makes you light up and you go, wow, wow, wow. And, on high bar, he does this talk full that he lands perfectly in handstand, then connects it straight into a Winkler. I mean, it's just things that make you things in his gymnastics that you just go, oh my God, I want to watch that again. I want to go follow. I want to go watch that on YouTube after the competition is over.
Yeah, it's great that it's very rare you get somebody that his style of gymnastics is so captivating. He doesn't need to be a big personality to get a lot of engagement, but he is a big personality. So you get those two things together and you get magic, right? So I think he's going to be somebody to watch. And the personality side of things is great, but as a gymnastics fan, I'm like, right, how good are you? And I'm like, after this competition, I'm like, you're very, very good. So I think that could be somebody challenging for team spots over the next few years, without a doubt. Super young. You talk about that rate of improvement on high bar. I mean, people got to know him, I think, from his style on floor and kicking out that double pike. I'd love to know where his base of gymnastics came from, who was his coach, where he kind of grew up, what club it would be, to know where his influences maybe came from. To me, it's very Russian style gymnastics in terms of his style, but again, that could have been Japanese, could have been Chinese, it might just be the US, but it stands out, that style of gymnastics. It's beautiful, right? It is artistic gymnastics, the gymnastics that he's performing.
Yeah, he's from Michigan, not from Ann Arbor, a little bit outside of Ann Arbor, but I actually don't know much about the club that he is from. So that would be a interesting thing to dive into.
Yeah, I'd love to know that. I'd love to know where that artistry comes from. It's very rare that, potentially that's just innate within him. But a lot of the time, somebody that's particularly artistic maybe had some influence from a choreographer when they were younger, a dance teacher, maybe somebody from the female side of the sport, or just somebody that had a base maybe in the classic Russian Soviet style of gymnastics. So yeah, I'd be really interested to know where that comes from, because his gymnastics is just beautiful. I mean, there's no leg splits anywhere, right? I remember when we spoke about it before, but Eileen told me when we spoke about who did we speak about? Was it Dan Keaton's? Yeah, she said, Dan Keaton's was just so, or was it was Dan Keaton's or Uchimura, but I mean, this translates to both of them, but she said you could never take a bad photo of them because even when you slowed them down, they were just, and you took a still image, their form was perfect. And that's what Cooper Kim's gymnastics is like. You take a picture anywhere within a routine and his form is absolutely beautiful. So it's just a photographer's dream to capture those moments of the gymnastics that he's performing. So yeah, I think for me, that was a real standout. He really blew me away actually with his performances, and he's going to be somebody that is going to be right there in amongst that team. What did you think to Yule and then maybe Josh Carnes as well? Put some really good scores, and maybe in another year, if you didn't have those three really strong all-arounders, he would have been probably in a top three.
Yeah, so Josh is an athlete that I've been watching for a very, very long time because several years ago at a camp, Brett McClure, mentioned offhand, he's a kid that could do every skill in the code of points. It's just that he's been injured. And so he's recently, moved on to Evo. And so I think that he's still like rebuilding back up to be the best athlete that he could be. He's incredible natural ability on parallel bars. He's getting stronger on rings. Like I can see kind of where the progression is for him. He needs more he needs more time. But I think just a name to keep in the mix for that 2028 team for sure. Yule surprised me in that, he hasn't really been back all that long, right? He just got cleared of his suspension earlier this year. He moved down to Oklahoma a few weeks before or maybe 3 days, I think he said, before the Pan American selection camp. He basically single-handedly helped ensure that the U.S. got a spot at the World Championships. Like, I don't want to diminish the other guys who are on the team, but, he really was the backbone of that team. And then he showed up here and placed top 5 in the nation. That's a good trajectory for someone who's only been back a handful of months. I think once he's able to up his consistency on pommel horse, and if he's able to add in a little bit more difficulty in clean up high bar, you really are looking at a top 3 spot in the country.
Yeah, I think Yule's a tricky one. When I look at that US team, those top 3 all-rounders there are so strong. And then nobody knows what Brody's going to do, right? Danila's probably going to come back into the mix being somebody that is going to offer a classic floor vault rings. Seeing where Yule fits into that is, that's what is tricky for me. I think you're right in that he's going to need that consistency on pommel horse, and he does tend to struggle with his dismount on pommel horse a lot when he's fatigued. He either does a C dismount or it kind of goes wrong there. And then high bar's difficult, right? Like you see him train upgrades, but he very rarely competes those upgrades. So I guess what I'm probably thinking as if you don't put him up on high bar, right, then he's going to be somewhat of a specialist. And is he strong enough to be a specialist to fit into that US team? I just don't know, and we're going to see that play out. But again, like you said, like it's an amazing story, redemption story, obviously, of all the controversy of, not being able to compete for so long, and then coming back, and then his performance to qualify the US into the Worlds and all of that. I mean, it's a great story, and I love you all. I almost feel like those top 3 rounds are so strong and balanced now across 6, other than Danila on rings, but you would expect that to come with time as he develops and he gets older. And he's already put a cross into his routine on rings, so he is trying to upgrade. I think it's going to be tough for you. But his parallel bars is one of the best routines in the world, so he always has that going for him, and he's been a world medalist on floor, so you just don't know. It just seems to me like most of the top teams in the world are basically, what happens at an Olympic Games is that every gymnast finds the path of least resistance. So all the routines look exactly the same. And I feel like the teams are going to do that too. So you're going to have 3 all-rounders, 1 strong guy, 1 technical guy on every team. Most of the top teams are going to look like that because they're all going to try and match each other. So it's just, where does somebody that has weaknesses, where do they fit in? And it's very clear to see where certain people fit in. Straight away I said Donald Wittenberg or Cameron Nelson. You can see exactly where they fit in. They're just the strong guy. Harry Hepworth is the example for GB, or Courtney Tulloch. And then the technical guys, Reuben Ward, Alex Cash, they're the technical guys that do pommel P-bar, high bar. I wonder where he fits in. What about, we've kind of spoke about day 1 and then the overall performances, just on those top 3 all-arounders, and maybe the other guys too, but let's focus on those 3. For the day 2, was there anything that stuck out for you or you were surprised about from those top 3, Kensley, that was different maybe to day 1? Did anybody step up their performance on that second day? Did anybody drop off a little bit?
Yeah, so Fred definitely stepped up. He increased his difficulty on high bar by, I think it was like 3 to 4 tenths or so. He also just performed better across the board, with the exception of maybe floor. I think he had a big bound on floor. But anywho, all that to say, he increased his total score by about a point there. I think for Danny's day 1 performance was like the best he could have done. Like that was really where I feel like his ceiling is right now. And so he either had to repeat that or it was going to be a little bit lower. And it was a little bit lower of a performance. I think he took a fall on floor. And then for Shane took a step up, and he actually on day 2 broke 84. He's the first US guy to break 84 without bonus. So that puts him easily in the top 10 in the world conversation for all around.
Yeah. And I thought on that day too, similar like Shane, just looked amazing again. Just brilliant. I mean, yeah, his team will be leaving Phoenix being very, very happy with what they've achieved over the time that because it's such a difficult thing to uproot, move to a new gym, get used to the new coaches, get used to your new way of training, new style, different dynamic within a group that you're training in. That takes a long period of time. I think athletes really underestimate how long that takes. I think that takes 18 months to 2 years. And you saw that here in athletes that have moved to Nottingham. And you're going to see it again because a lot of athletes that were at Birmingham are now moving to Nottingham because the coach that was at Birmingham is now a national coach. So all of the Birmingham gymnasts in Great Britain are moving basically to Nottingham. That's going to take them another 18 months to 2 years to get used to just the life part of uprooting and moving. let alone the gymnasticsy part, right? You've got to get used to a new coach and a new system and a new preparation and a new setting, and that takes a lot longer than athletes think. And I think that takes typically 18 months to 2 years. And I think the team at Evo will leave thinking, wow, we've done a real good job with Shane. Like, that's amazing. That's a real good example of what we've built here at Evo. So very impressive from the whole team there. Because like I said, Shane could have easily been a gymnast that probably walked away from the sport and has been the first US gymnast to break 84 this cycle, which is amazing. And then Fred, again, I thought just looked great. Definitely has more in the tank. You can see that. That experience, I think, what you're seeing there by somebody improving their performance from day one to day two, you're seeing the experience there, and you're seeing the lack of experience in Danila of having an amazing day on day one and just struggling to replicate that on day two. It's funny, I saw an interview with Fred where they asked him about Danila, and he said, I expect him to be on the world's team if you see his technique, the way he opens out his double twist into his double front on floor. I wonder whether Danila heard that and watched it and listened to it the night before, because that's where he made his mistake on day two. When you're a young athlete, you often listen to a lot of the stuff that's coming in, that's being spoken about you, or you kind of see it, and then all of a sudden you get in your head a little bit and you overthink and you overanalyze. And I saw him, I think he sat down and put his hands down on his double twist punch double front, and then he did it again. He made another mistake. And when I saw that, I smiled, because I was like, oh, he's fine. He just needs to learn that lesson of that experience of 2 days back to back and not to lose your focus. But I think he did really, really well to then perform great on all the other apparatus, and that shows a real quality in a young gymnast, and he will have learned a lot from that. And his attitude to making mistakes and not letting his head go down or getting emotional, it was really, really good. A great sign for him in the future, and I'm sure his coaches will have been really proud of him for that. Maybe in some ways more than the actual performance. I think that shows a lot, and probably the US coaches will think the same. Let's look at the other two athletes that then make up this team for the World Championships, Kensley. It's going to be Danila, Fred, Shane, and then you're going to have Kameron Nelson and Patrick Hoops, Patty Hoops on pommel horse. Just talk to me a little bit about Kameron and Patty Hoops. One thing I noticed, Kensley, I don't know if anybody else picked up on this, but the first day when I watched Cam do his floor routine, he did a punch full twice. My reaction was, does he have a twisting problem or issue? Because that's interesting that he did that, because he did his punch full double front after he did a 2.5 punch full. So my first reaction was, maybe he's got a twisting issue there where he's twisting when he doesn't want to twist. So I picked that up. So I wondered whether anybody else picked that up from day one to day two, because obviously he's a floor guy, so it's not great if you've got a twisting thing going on, and he does such complicated gymnastics. That might be a thing there, and I don't want to highlight that if it is a problem for him, but I think it's important to, because a lot of athletes have that. It might have just been a thing, it just happened. He might have meant to do it, I don't know, but I did spot that, and that stood out to me. So that. I don't know whether you noticed that, Kensley. But then just on his performances, I thought vault was great. I thought rings, again, he's showing his strengths on those other apparatus, not just the floor. And then he came back day two. I think the one thing you've got to say about Cam is that I think you get so used to him doing 2 triple backs, you underestimate just how difficult that is physically to do that, and to do that back-to-back days, and to probably train that skill in warm-up and in podium is just physically so taxing. So every time he does that, I'm like, that's just so impressive. And then Patty Hoops came out, sorry Kensley to break you up there, to jump in, and then just Patty Hoops, he obviously came out on top in the battle for pommel horse. What did you make of that?
Yeah, so Kameron I did not pick up on him doing the full twice. When you're live trying to cover a meet and live blog and watch different things, I watched his floor routine and he fell on the triple pike first. And so actually I decided to go switch and look at another athlete, because that basically was going to take him out of the running for the floor title. So in terms of like storyline and importance for what that meet was, like for me, that immediately takes it out. I think one of the things I guess I was curious about for him was, okay, he was going up on floor. I think that was their final. In fact, yeah, that was definitely their final rotation. So if the U.S. ends up in a draw where they start on pommel horse and end on floor, I'm kind of wondering, like, okay, well, is Syke going to rework his routine so that he's actually not doing both triples? Because he just kind of looked, it seemed like gassed a little bit. So that's more where my brain was. So I had actually stopped watching his floor routine, and I need to go back and watch it. So no, I did not pick up on that. Cam fits into this team so well because he can do floor, he can do rings, he can do vault. Well, he's the only guy on the team right now that has a 5-2 vault. Well, the team I'm assuming Great Britain is bringing is having 2 5-6 vaults and a 5-2 vault. So the U.S. is losing a lot to Great Britain right there, especially because it's such a high scoring event. So I think simply for that vault alone and for the rings, they needed Cam. So that's really how he fit into the team. And in terms of Patty, I always get nervous watching anyone go on pommel horse because it's so easy to slip off. And with him, there's like a little bit of reduction of that because like I really don't want to jinx him. I'm so like knock on wood, but like he hasn't fallen at a major meet in over 2 years. He is one of the most consistent pommel horse workers I've seen. He added in a Manukian to his pommel horse routine that he told the media he decided to add it in like 2 or 3 weeks before the competition started, which is remarkable because if you see the videos of like Steven Edorostic working at, he's talked about like trying to figure out the skill and that it's taken significantly longer. And that's not to pit the two of them against each other, just to show, I think, it's remarkable how quickly Patty was able to put that in. His day 1 routine was much better than his day 2 routine. His day 2 routine, he wasn't able to actually make his intended dismount. So he was down in difficulty and down in final score. But again, someone that you do want to take to the World Championships.
Yeah, I just, if I was in the US and I was 21 again, and I would be going, right, what's the easiest way for me to get into this team? It's to be strong enough on pommel that I'm close enough to the top pommel guys, but to be also able to offer parallel bars and high bar. And I think that's the best way for anybody outside those kind of top guys. Anybody that has a skill set in that area, that is that more technical guy, I think that is the way to go if you can do that. Is there anybody that stands out for you, Kensley, that maybe could offer that could build up towards that? Are there any of the juniors? Obviously, I don't know whether you watched a junior competition there at the US Nationals. Are there any guys coming up that are showing a lot of promise in that kind of area?
You're really testing my knowledge.
I'm just trying to think because it's hard not to compare the US team to the British team, and the British team clearly have Reuben, Alex Cash, Jonas. They're very similar athletes. They're going to be really strong on those. Max is another one. They're all going for those free apparatus, and you've got to expect that the US is going to try and go up and match that. So I'm just wondering whether there's an opportunity there for somebody in the US, and it might be a junior come through over the next 18 months that's like strong enough on pommel horse, but also really strong on parallel bars and can impact on those two apparatus. Maybe you don't need that if the top all-around guys are strong enough on those pieces. Maybe you don't need that, or maybe that guy could be somebody like Brody coming back, doesn't want to do 6 pieces. Maybe he does P-bar, high bar, and potentially pommels.
Yeah, it's a good question. So in terms of juniors, I go to the competition, but I'm not looking like heavily in depth in terms of like what I'm watching and storylines and things like that, because I think covering juniors that heavily is a little bit controversial for me personally, because they're minor athletes. And I think from like a sports psychology perspective, like whether you talk about them or you don't talk about them, right? There's that mind of like, well, she didn't talk about me or Sam didn't talk about me. Does that mean that they think I'm not good enough? Or, like I'll typically mention like, oh, so-and-so won this and so-and-so won that. And that's like the extent of it, because I expect that senior athletes are at the point where they can have the self-control, like not to listen if they know it could affect them. But I think for junior athletes, I don't have that expectation of them to have been working with sports psych long enough, because a lot of athletes don't get access to that until they get into the collegiate system. And so I watch juniors very lightly, but not heavily enough. So I'm not confident enough to say like, yes, there is, or no, there isn't at this point. In terms of the U.S. makeup, I think what you said is really astute. It just depends on who those top all-arounder guys are and what their weaknesses are. Because the top all-arounder guys that showed up this year, the hole was actually still rings. Like I would not have been surprised if instead of putting Patty on the team, they had actually put Asher Cohen on the team because he won still rings. Because if you're looking at that lineup, you're like, there's some hole there. Whereas if it was Asher Hong and Brody Malone and Donnell Wettenberg, there's no hole on still rings. And so then that's where you go, okay, the pommel guy is more valuable. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah. I mean, we're still 2 years away, and we're kind of trying to work out, and we'll see, I guess, at the World Championships how that plays out. And without a doubt, there'll be somebody that comes around in the next 2 years out of nowhere that we're not talking about right now, in the same way that Fred maybe did for the last Olympic Games, in the same way that Luke and Harry Hepworth did for GB. Like, there will always be somebody probably on that Olympic team in LA that we're not talking about right now that comes through. And I think what is evident, given that the athletes that were not available or fit enough to do these US national championships or be involved in the mix right now, is that the depth is a real strength there in the US. I think you see that depth. A lot of guys breaking 80, more than a lot of countries have in their national championships in 2026. Some nations struggling to put more than 2 guys breaking 80 right in the same competition. So I think that's really impressive, and still having those real high level specialist guys as well. Although I see the all-arounders playing a much bigger role in this cycle for sure. Let's look at the European Championships then, Kensley, and maybe our expectations going in. I think if we start with a team, we've obviously got the British team. Because of the makeup of the Commonwealth Games and everything that's been going on, it looks different to what we would have expected. Obviously no Jake, which is going to be a massive loss to the team in terms of his difficulty that he's bringing, also his experience, and then injuries. That team has moved around a lot, so we've kind of ended up with Courtney, Harry, Joe, Jonas and Sol. It's going to be really exciting to see Sol compete as a senior gymnast. Another gymnast that maybe could capitalise on an opportunity that they wouldn't have otherwise had following the Junior Worlds last year. So again, another young gymnast breaking into the senior team quite quickly. Beautiful style of gymnastics. So I think people are going to, if they're not already aware of his gymnastics, they will be after this competition, and he'll get a lot of I'm sure a lot of praise for his style of gymnastics, and he just looks different because he's a lot taller, he's quite slight, and his gymnastics stands out a lot, so it's going to be exciting to watch him. What do you make of the GB team and your expectations going into this European Championships, Kensley? I mean, the night before my wedding, I had all of my groomsmen, we were all in effectively like a bachelor pad. It was great, it was a lot of fun, and we were watching the World Cup, and then the conversation turned to gymnastics because 4 of the people in the room were gymnastics coaches, and we kind of had a back and forth about how strong we felt the Russian team were going to be. And it was kind of like a real mixed bag in the room, but it was really interesting. My friends that were invested in the GB team doing very well because they had athletes involved were basically saying that the Russian team haven't competed for years, like they're not. And then the other, my other friends in the room were like, no, don't underestimate how strong they're going to be. They'll be really strong. So that was really interesting. I think that conversation that we had there. What are your expectations for Great Britain?
Yeah, I did listen to that podcast, and that very heavily motivated me to run the data to see how close the Russian and the British team were, to see which of your friend groups were more likely to be correct. So I will say what surprised me. So I'm going to back up a bit by saying like what I have predicted the world team to be. And so I would have expected the world team to like be like far and away have like higher scores and be like superior to this European team, because I thought the world team would be Joe Fraser, Jake Jarman, Harry Hepworth, Luke Whitehouse, and Reuben Ward is what I'm predicting. So like I ran the numbers for that. And the score that I got for that team was, I texted it to you, so I've got to pull it up, but it was in the 253s, if I remember correctly. And then, so I ran the numbers for the European team, which is Joe Fraser, Courtney Tulloch, Harry Hepworth, Jonas Rushworth, and Sol Scott. And it was like 252.15. And I was really expecting something in the 240s, to be completely honest. But it's actually not too far off what I'm expecting that the world team to be able to put up. And then I looked at the Russian team, and they're at 252.228. And this is right. we're using a lot of domestic scores, some World Cup scores. So like you've got some definite overscoring happening here. When I'm making these predictions, I'm looking at, okay, well, where did did this routine seem a little bit scored? Okay, I'll bump it down a notch to try and bring things in line. So it's not a perfect data system by any means. So like, don't hold me specifically to those numbers. But all that to say is like using the same system, the British and the Russian teams are within a tenth of a point of each other. And maybe your friends and your groomsmen are correct. Like maybe the Russians are going to have, not competed as a team. We don't know what that dynamic is. How are they going to do? Potentially they implode. I don't know. But I think to your point, their coaches have been around for a very long time. I think the Russians are probably going to have a chip on their shoulder because they've been not able to compete at this competition in 5 years. And, the Russian, on the women's side specifically, were denied a lot of visas, and there's been a lot of like tension and friction. And so I could imagine this team coming in being like, we are ready to show the world just exactly what we can do. And then again, on the flip side, that could bring a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So
I think it could go one or two ways. It was just a really interesting conversation, and I kind of I felt myself halfway through, kind of like zooming out and keeping quiet and really thinking about it. This is really interesting. Like there's a real camp of underestimating that style of gymnastics, and it just reminded me of the conversation I had with the head of World Gymnastics, right? So Mr. Watanabe. I walked with him from the hotel at the British Championships over to the arena. I had a chat with him and I was like, I remember being with you in Japan. And, I started to talk to him about we went out he took us out for dinner and we watched the national championships. And I said, so when are Russia going to be back? And he said, they'll be back. They'll be back pretty soon. And I was like, okay, so they're going to be in Worlds. But then he basically made a remark like, we need to move away from the Russian system. We need to move towards a Japanese system of autonomous coaching. And I was like, that's really interesting because you're the head of gymnastics. Kind of what I took from that was there is like this there's an attitude of not an underestimation, but a wanting to push and disregard just how good that part of the world is at gymnastics and the long, rich culture and history and tradition they have within the sport and the knowledge and the way in which they go about their business in a very different way. They have the best tumbling coaches in Russia teach their artistic gymnasts to tumble. On the female side, they have specific asymmetric bars coaches that just coach that apparatus. They do it very differently. Like it's a real system. And that's given us so much of the culture of the sport that we love, right? And it just made me smile a little bit. And I thought, you guys are underestimating just how good they are. but I know because I grew up within that world, right? I know it. I know what gymnastics means to that part of the world. Like it's not just a sport to them. It's a bit like when the World Cup was taking place and Argentina were playing England. I was saying to people, but you don't understand. Like football is our biggest sport in the UK, but in Argentina it's religion. Like it's everything. They'll fight to the death for this thing, what it means to them. So it isn't like that. But gymnastics in Russia is everything, right? There's so much respect from the public towards that sport because of the long, rich history. And those coaches in Russia, the way in which they go about their coaching journey is very different to the UK in that they stay in the sport forever. They never leave. So they take a gymnast through from start to finish, and then they start again to finish. And some of those coaches are on 5th, 6th generation of gymnasts. So that knowledge is so incredible. I mean, if you see those gymnasts now that are competing for the Russian team, the top guys, whether it be Arseny Dukno or whether it be the gymnast that finished there in second place, is it Savelli? Sayadin? His coach was the coach of Yuri Ryzanov from Vladimir, right? That tragically passed away. Like the knowledge there is unbelievable. It's amazing, and I've said many times, like the knowledge in the room is like the most important thing. So, I think they are being underestimated a little bit, and it's exciting to see what they're able to do here. But I do think the British team is really strong, and I like the new dynamic. And it's interesting what you said there about your prediction of the world's team and then that European team not being too dissimilar in their potential scoring. And I think that speaks to the difference the reduction again in 8 skills has had. It means everybody's so much closer. The margins are so much smaller.
Yeah, I had my predicted world team at 253.9, and then the predicted.
Okay, so nearly 2 marks. So it is a big difference, right?
252.1. But it's much, enough of a difference that I think that I'm assuming that's the team that they're going with for worlds, depending how people
depending on the European
Championships
and health and
Sure, but I was expecting this team with Jonas and Sol to be like down at 250, maybe high 240s. And so I was very surprised when I came up and I was like, oh, like the British stuff is a little bit stronger than I had realized at that moment. And so I think that that's important to communicate.
Yeah.
I think one of the really interesting things about this upcoming European competition is in that all-around battle. Like, of course, Joe is definitely going to be up there, assuming he's doing all-around. But you could potentially end up with like a Russian-Ukrainian podium. I mean, I know Ilya Kovtun is competing for Croatia now, but it could be very interesting if you have Arseny Dunkno, Dano Marinov, and Ilya Kovtun on that podium together. And we've seen where Ukrainians and Russians have shared podiums together, and that people have like turned their back on flags and things like that. So that is kind of a storyline that I'm going to be watching as well.
And we'll pick up on that all around, Kensley. One of the big things that I wanted to ask you about is can Manrique Lardouet compete for Italy at this European Championship? Is he in?
That is a great question.
Because he hit nearly 83 at their nationals, and I watched his routines, and if I'm honest, I expected that he was basically just going to his career was just kind of going to dissolve away, but his routines were... If he gets the nod to compete at the Europeans and he's back in the game, I mean, he has everything that it takes to easily be one of the top all-arounders in the world again. I mean, talent-wise, just unbelievable. But his routines and his gymnastics at the Italian Nationals was amazing, and he nearly hit 83. So because that makes a big difference there, I think, in the dynamic between Italy, Switzerland and France, who I'm expecting to be challenging for that bronze medal. That really changes things for Italy a little bit, I think.
Let's see. He is, while you were talking, I was able to pull up the nominative roster, and he is not on the nominative roster. I don't know how much time he has left between the Cuba and Italian changeover. That's something I would have to really dig into, but he is not going to be, according to the nominative roster, not going to be competing this year. Yeah,
it'd be great to know when he can compete again, whether Worlds or if it's next year. I hope it's sooner rather than later, so we get to see him compete, but also so he's got enough time to get back into competing, at that high level again, because he is absolutely somebody for anybody out there that maybe is unaware of his gymnastics because they're younger, maybe they're a young athlete or they're new to the sport of men's gymnastics. A gymnast that was an all-around world medalist back in 2015. Go and watch his gymnastics from this year at the 2026 Italian Nationals, because his gymnastics looked incredible. So that was a big question I had for you, because then I was going to look at those other teams. Obviously the Swiss will be really strong. France have got a lot of up and coming young juniors that are strong in the all-around, but up until this point, I've had quite a few mistakes, but they had some good all-arounders at the Junior Worlds last year. So I was just going to maybe get your prediction for rounding out that men's team podium.
Yeah, the bronze feels wide open to me in a way that is very exciting, because the Swiss team is strong, but their top gymnast, Noé Seifert, has been adding in a lot of upgrades, and his scores have typically been in that 77, 78 range. So depending on what routines he decides to perform at this championships, I think that they could actually be potentially a little bit down. The Italian team, one of their top gymnasts, Nicolai
Bertolini.
Thank you. Bartolini has just retired, so he's not going to be competing. So yes, the Italian team is still strong, but maybe a little bit down. I'm looking at the Netherlands team. The Netherlands team, I think if they put it all together, could be kind of like a surprise in there. So it's a spot I'm very interested in watching, and don't have a very firm prediction of who it's going to be.
Yeah, I think a lot of those teams are quite young. Maybe we'll, over the next 2 years, those younger athletes will develop, and those teams could be quite strong. I think it speaks to just how tight men's gymnastics is going to be now with the reduction to 8 skills. I think it's going to really come down to making that team final at an Olympic Games like in LA is like almost the top 8 can't have any falls. Maybe the big nations can, but those nations that are going to be between probably spot 6, 7, and 8 are going to have to go clean to beat all of the other teams around them, which makes it really exciting to see who is it going to be that can make that top 8 in that team final. And we'll get to see that, I guess, next week at the European Championships in the team. We'll get to see the first iteration of that play out, and then again at the World Championships and see what that first team final looks like at the World Championships in this Olympic cycle. But yeah, Noah Seifer, obviously his performance last year winning that bronze medal, it's going to be interesting to see what he does, where he takes that, how he uses it as a springboard. It was certainly a surprise medal. I mean, his execution was probably the highest in that competition, right, if not one of them. But he's going to have to add in a lot of difficulty if he wants to challenge again in the future. And in France, like I said, some exciting young gymnasts and juniors. And, I have seen a little bit, I'm following Bram's YouTube vlogs again because I just love them. They're so nostalgic. And he often shares a lot of what the guys in the Netherlands are doing, and I have noticed wow, the level of gymnastics looks quite high there in the Netherlands, so that's quite exciting. So I'll definitely keep an eye out for that. In the all-around, Kensley, I mean, the big contenders I've got written down: Joe, again for the GB team. I mean, I wouldn't underestimate just the impact of having Joe on your team. Just that experience, how much of a competitor he is. I mean, his performance at the British really was outstanding. He just looked like he was on a different level to it. He just looks like a top 10 in the world, top 6 in the world gymnast. Obviously, you've got Kovtun, who can compete for Croatia, so that'll be exciting to see him. You've got Arseny Dukno of Russia, who is, very, very exciting, again, because he was a junior last year. And I believe he had the option to compete as a junior again this year, but chose to go senior. It'll be the first time a lot of gymnastics fans are seeing him, and I'm sure he will make waves with his performances. Then my question mark around Manrik Lardouet, but without him being there, I think the second Russian could either be the kind of the younger guy, Savili. Apologies if I can't pronounce his name properly there. Sergey will be angry at me. And then Milad Karimi is always another strong all-rounder. I expect him to do well. Do you know if Adam Azil is competing Turkey, Kensley? And he's always somebody that is really good in the all-round, has been a European champion in the all-round.
Yes, I believe he is on the nominative roster. He has just confirmed it. He has competed all around a couple times in Bundesliga this year, but it has not gone particularly well. I'm not counting him out by any means, but we're talking 76s. So yeah. I don't know if he's been dealing with an injury or not, but he's coming in as the reigning European champion. So it's certainly someone we don't want to count out.
Yeah. Anybody that I've missed there?
Did you say Kovtun?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I think that those are really the top contenders that we're looking at.
Yeah. And then it'll just be interesting to see if there's a second. I would imagine it's going to be Jonas doing all around. Jonas there doing 6 pieces. So that'll be
and Marinov of Russia.
Yeah, so I think Savili, and then either Daniel Marinov maybe for that second spot in the Russian team. I remember Marinov at the Worlds last year finishing 4th with a really basic rings routine. Straight away I thought he must have a shoulder injury. He's improved that routine because I watched a lot of the Russian nationals, so I would imagine him to be quite competitive in the all-around.
I do think it is important to note that at this competition, they are not going to be competing as Russia. They are going to be competing under a neutral flag. So even though the FIG has limited restrictions or lifted the restrictions on them, European Gymnastics has not. And so they are going to be competing as neutrals. But I did clarify this because there are 13 team spots to qualify to World Championships from this competition. They will be able to compete at the World Championships as Russia. So it's a weird dynamic, but they are not officially going to be Russia at this competition.
But they are competing as a team, Kensley, right?
They are competing as a team, correct?
I think that's just me more calling a spade and going, I know that the fans
100%.
I know the fans aren't stupid. They know they're Russia. I know they're Russia. We all know they're Russia. So that's just me calling them Russia, I think. But yeah, that is right. They're going to be under the neutral flag again. But they are effectively on the process of competing as Russia again. And that will be, they'll be doing that at the World Championships. So what about, just to finish off then, Kensley, I think, Floor, you're probably looking at Harry, Artem,
Arseny,
yeah, of course, yeah. You would have had Jake, really, or Luke, depending on who was going. Pommel horse, probably looking at Tarjeta of Italy, the two Armenians, Kurbanov, kind of the classic, almost pommel final that you would see.
Kurbanov competes at the Asian Championships.
That's right. I get that wrong all the time because I got that wrong in another episode. And so that would be the same with Karimi, right? So that's what I got wrong last time, I think. For me, I always think Kazakhstan, Europe. I don't know why. Because they were in the Soviet Union, I always just go Europe, and they're actually...
Yeah, there are some, straight, like Turkey.
Israel,
technically part. I guess you have Istanbul that's part of Europe, anywho. But yes, it's a little complicated.
Yeah. So that's right.
Reese McClanagan is going to be.
Oh, Reese! Yeah, you can't forget Reese.
But he's had a rough go, I would say.
I think he's just probably adjusting and just getting used to. Getting used to the new cycle and the new routine, trying to find the right routine for this cycle in the same way that maybe Steven struggled a little bit, trying to get the right routine and how it fits into this. And maybe those younger gymnasts that didn't have a break and didn't have that time off over that Olympics and have gone stuck at 8 skills. They're finding that a little bit easier. The skills that are being done are kind of different skills to the type of skills that were effective in the last code. So Reese is struggling with that maybe a little bit, but he's the Olympic champion, so he's going to figure that out. And he has put out some great performances so far. They've just been a little bit more hit and miss. But my expectations are that Reese will do a great job there at the Europeans. And I think he'll be doing a floor routine too. So that's pretty cool. I think rings is probably going to be a battle of... I'd expect Harry and Courtney probably to be in that rings final. But, I really like Harry's construction now. I think Harry is one stuck triple back away from winning a medal on rings at major championships. I think you've probably got is it Zyka, the Russian gymnast, that's quite interesting that I'm hearing a lot about. You've got
Ilya Zyka. You've
got the Armenians again. We're going to be super strong on rings. They're kind of where I had Patronus, obviously. Vault will be really strong. I think Harry, Shapurny, Davtyan, probably quite a few more that I'm missing, even Sponovic.
Here's the question: is Harry bringing 2 5-6 vaults?
I mean, he's training them. I could ask the question. I haven't asked the question. I would imagine,
because he's gone back and forth. He's done the 5-6 5-2 combo.
I think he would probably do one in the first day, and then for the final, probably go for both of them. I'd imagine. I imagine his goal going into the Euros will be as a stepping stone towards the Worlds, would be to go for both of them in the final, if he's in the final. So he maybe would... I wouldn't be surprised if he did both in qualifying, but my expectations were maybe he does one, and then maybe does the pike drag and a handspring 2.5, and then does the pike drag and the handspring triple in the final. But that's just me off the top of my head. Going for that one. Parallel bars, I was thinking maybe Kovtun, Joe Fraser. The
2 Russians are very strong.
Russian gymnasts on parallel bar. Yeah, Marinov, with his back in full out. And obviously Arseny as well. And the other Russian, the new young one, is really strong from Vladimir. And then what about high bar? Kensley, who are you looking out for on high bar? Obviously, Joe won a world medal last year.
You've got, of course, Joe. Robert Tavoragal won last year. High bar's I don't know. Kovtun has done some work on some of the Swiss gymnasts as well. one again, I think is a little bit more open than maybe some of the other titles. You've got from Belgium, Noah Quavida, who does the triple back off. He'll be competing here as well.
Maybe from France.
Marius Giorgio.
Yeah, Marius Giorgio. Even the Mansard from France, the young gymnast. He's great on high bar. Not competing. Is he injured?
He's injured.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So maybe that French team might struggle a little bit there with having that as an injury. A very young team, that French team too. I think just to finish, it's quite interesting comparing Europe and those apparatus finals. And I don't know why people do this, but I remember going to the Youth Olympics and being told that, oh, Sam, the European judges are going to really help you. You'd be like, that's weird. They're all going to work together to try and have a European athlete beat the athletes from Asia or from the Americas. And I was like, that's really strange. But it's interesting to kind of compare, what apparatus are strong within Europe compared to the rest of the world. And I think just from looking there, pommel horse really strong, rings really strong, vault really strong, but maybe P-bars and high bar, and you look at the Chinese, the Japanese, also the American team, the Colombians, Taiwan, that's where we're kind of lagging a little bit within Europe when you look at that. So it'll be interesting to see that and then compare to the rest of the world. And look, Kensley, thanks so much for bringing all of the stats and the statistics, and that was really helpful for me because I've been really out of the loop for 2 weeks and my brain is a little bit frazzled. But I've really enjoyed that today and hearing about the US Championships, kind of reflecting a little bit on the Commonwealth Games and then looking ahead to the European Championships. We're at the halfway point in the Olympic cycle, and I think this is the year where it gets really interesting and exciting, and you start to see maybe the roots of those teams that will be there in LA kind of solidify themselves a little bit, and I'm excited to see how this all plays out, and my expectations are that there will be lots of juniors over the next 12 to 18 months that really come out of the woodwork and surprise a lot of people, and it's going to be super exciting to follow the sport. So yeah, thank you so much for as always bringing that knowledge. Keep continuing to do what you do. I listen to your podcast all the time, every episode, and I really enjoy it. It's great what you're doing. Please keep doing it. Thank you for giving us your time. And for anybody that maybe doesn't follow your work, just to remind people, I'm sure most people that follow this podcast do, where can they keep up to date with the sport of men's gymnastics?
They can follow us on YouTube or Instagram at Neutral Deductions, and our website is neutraldeductions.com, and we have articles and interviews and statistics and all sorts of graphics that help you sort of understand how to predict this often at times unpredictable sport.
Amazing. Kensley, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week, and I'm sure we'll chat very, very soon.